اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد. رسول كريم رؤوف.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, Bishop Mario. Good evening, Mr. Atif, President of the Ahmadiyya. Welcome to this Interfaith Collaborative Seminar, which is posing the question, how did Jesus and Muhammad bring peace to the world? The seminar is being organized by the Ahmadiyya Muslim community and the Diocese of Gozo. The mission statement of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community is based on the axiom, love for all, hatred to none, and declares that Islam believes that unless one learns to live with oneself and to regard all other persons as brothers, one cannot attain a state of peace with God. The members of the Ahmadiyya, I believe, are among those who the Quran in verse 2563 of Al-Quran, the criterion, describes as the worshippers of the All-Merciful who tread gently upon the earth, and when the ignorant address them, they reply, peace. On its part, the Diocese of Gozo, as a community within the Catholic Church, proclaims that God is love, a love incarnated in Jesus, in whom every word and every act spoke of mercy. In announcing the Jubilee year of mercy, some weeks ago, exactly on the 4th April, Pope Francis spoke of the fact that Muslims implore God as the All-Merciful and encourage dialogue between Christians and Muslims so that we grow to understand and know each other better. I feel I should say that the seminar is very relevant. We are living in times of insecurity and fear. Studies in social psychology point to the fact that fear breeds hatred. Social intuitions are created and fed by fear. An intuition can be described as backstage thinking. Rightly or wrongly, an intuition makes us know more than we know. Our intuitions are powerful and sometimes perilous. In this context, interfaith dialogue is a means by which we can rationalize our thinking and put circumstances in their true perspective. This seminar is an instant in this regard. It is a small but hopefully effective attempt to sow and promote trust. This evening we have two keynote speakers, Dr. Alfred Gregg on my right, and for the Diocese of Gozo, and Imam Ibrahim Noonan from the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. I did pronounce your names here. At the end of the keynote speeches, there will be time for comments and questions from the floor. The first speaker will be Dr. Alfred Gregg from the Diocese of Gozo. A short CV of Dr. Gregg. Dr. Alfred Gregg is an established lawyer with 38 years of legal experience. I can see his white hairs today from 38 years of legal experience. He graduated as Doctor of Laws from the University of Malta in 1975. He's also a member of the Albo of Advocate in canonical marriage cases since 1994. Dr. Gregg also furthered his studies and in 1977 obtained a Magister Juris in European and Comparative Law. Dr. Gregg serves in several legal fields. His past appointments and work experiences include lecturing at the University of Malta, Malta's Faculty of Human Rights and Democratization and Family Law. He was also appointed lecturer in the Department of Sociology at the University of Malta Gozo Center. Moreover, he has also acted as legal advisor to a number of corporations and organizations operating in commercial, industrial, and voluntary capacity. In the past, he has been appointed, amongst others, as legal advisor of the Bishop's Curia, legal advisor to the Hombus Bank, and legal advisor to the Bank of Valletta Limited. Other appointments include being member of the Diocesan Finance Committee for several years, acting as disciplinary commissioner in the for a sports organization, and also being the representative for Malta and the United Nations on the Law of the Sea in 1987, and the United Nations Conference on Namibia in 1986 and 1987. Dr. Greg holds the warrant to exercise the legal profession and is also a member of the Chamber of Advocates. I would like to add that Dr. Greg is also a poet with several publications. Thank you. Dr. Greg.
In the 7th verse of the Sermon of the Mount, and also the 7th of what are known as the Beatitudes, the King James Version of the Bible text reads, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." Making peace, therefore, is of the very essence of Christianity. Jesus does not say, "Blessed are the peace lovers," or "Blessed are the peacekeepers," but blessed are the peacemakers. This is not simply a love of concord and harmony, or the hatred of strife and turmoil that is sometimes found in natural men, but something more positive and concrete. It involves an action. The 7th Beatitude has to do more with the conduct than the character, although the former without the latter is hardly possible. There must first be a peaceable spirit before there will be active efforts put forth to make peace. The followers of Jesus have been called to peace. When he called them, they found their peace, or he is their peace. But now they are told that they must not only have peace, but also make it. And to that end, they renounce all violence and tumult. Peacekeeping is a divine work. For peace means reconciliation, and God is the author of peace and of reconciliation. It is hardly surprising then that the particular blessing which attaches to peacemakers is that they shall be called children of God. For they are seeking to do what their Father has done, loving people with his love. Being a peacemaker is part of being surrendered to God, for God brings peace. Therefore, the peacemaker has to abandon the effort to get his needs met through forcing his way and destroying those who oppose him, namely his enemies. God comes to us in Christ to make peace with us, and we participate in God's grace as we go to our enemies to make peace with them. One astonishing thing that we hardly ever realize is that you cannot convert anyone by violence, or you can crush them, you can subjugate them by force. As more often is the case now, the peacemakers were those who brought peace by using force, conquering and vanquishing others who were creating problems to the established order. There is the well-known Latin aphorism that says, "Si vis pace, para bellum." If you want peace, prepare for war. Certainly, it is not in the sense that the 7th Beatitude should be read. Even today, we refer to someone who breaks the law as an outlaw or a criminal, and therefore anybody who does not comply with the law is considered a menace, a rebel, even under those systems of laws which are operating. Simply by being the laws of the established society, they have the claim to legitimacy, and therefore whoever goes against them is breaking the law, is breaking the peace. Peace then has to be brought about by using the full force of the law, the soldiers, the police, the court-martials, and those who implement the law. It is quite a contradiction in terms that the state itself a peaceful solution to the different aspirations of the members of a community has to stand on the symbols of violence, the soldiers, the police, the court martials, the wardens, and so on and so forth. At the time of Jesus Christ, it was the Roman emperor and the Roman armies which brought the peace by using the force against those who would not obey, or those who did not share the same ideas of peace. Very often then, as it is now, the force of the majority uses its strength against the minority. In the time of Christ, this was most commonly used to refer to the Roman emperors who brought the peace. The others who did not comply, who would not accept the Pax Romana, were the rebels, liable to be vanquished, annihilated, because they were perceived as threatening the peace. It is paradoxical that someone like Jesus Christ, who preached the gospel of peace, found himself at loggerheads with the established order that was meant to ensure law and order, imperial Rome, and this to the extent that he was given the punishment of crucifixion, the punishment which was meted out to those who committed treason. It would appear, therefore, that the Christian ideal of peace-making was somehow repugnant to the idea of peacekeeping enforced by the few over the rest, or the majority over the minority. Roughly speaking, during the first 300 years of Christian church, all of her leaders said that the use of violence, the serving in the military or police forces, was a sin. This teaching was based on a number of scriptures writings, such as Matthew chapter 5, line 39, resist no evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy cheek, turn to him the other also. Titus chapter 3, line 2, remind the Christians to speak evil of no man, to be no brawlers, but gentle, showing meekness to all men. Hebrews 12, line 14, follow peace with all men and holiness, without which no man shall see God. But there have been Christians throughout the ages who believed that under no circumstances should a Christian go to war, or that war is justified. This position has been upheld by the so-called conscientious objectors and many who have suffered personally because of their conviction. But then came St. Augustine's arguments in favor of a just war, arguments that changed a lot in the way Christians began to perceive war and the use of force. The argument is that a war that brings about greater peace could be justified. But is war consistent with the law of non-resistance preached and modeled by Jesus Christ? The pacifist tradition is based on the interpretation of that part of the Sermon of the Mount where Jesus said, open inverted commas, you have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evil person. But whosoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. Matthew chapter 5, lines 38 to 39. This is the law of non-resistance. Following Christ's command to turn the other cheek, many pacifists believe that it is better to suffer violence than it is to commit violence. They believe this was taught by Jesus and modeled by him in the words of Peter. Quote, for you have been called for this purpose, since Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example for you to follow in his steps. 1 Peter chapter 2, line 21. Pacifists have said that Christian obligation as believers is to follow the example of Jesus, who turned the other cheek and did not return evil for evil. They say we are to resist no evil. They interpret this to mean that we are never to resist evil under any circumstances or under any condition. Just as Christ did not retaliate against violence, but rather he suffered on the cross, taking suffering to himself and making it the ultimate price of salvation. The pacifist sees the death of Christ, an innocent victim in the face of injustice, as a pattern for all Christians to follow. Therefore, war is inconsistent with the ethic of love. Again, quoting from Jesus in the Sermon of the Mount, open quotes, you have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Matthew chapter 5, lines 43 to 44. If Jesus called us to love our enemies, not to take arms against them, to pray for those who persecute us, to turn the other cheek and not to resist evil, but to allow love to overcome evil, how can one kill another human being for whom Jesus died for whoever reason at all? How can we adopt the attitude and say, Jesus loves us, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to kill you? But there are instances in the gospel text which weigh heavily against this sort of pacifism that we find in Christ's message and that we have been talking about. For example, in John chapter 2, line 14, Jesus comes to the temple and finds people selling oxen and sheep and doves, and the money changers sitting in their tables. Jesus sees that religious leaders have turned his father's house of prayer into a marketplace instead of prayers and supplications. The zeal for his father's house consumes him. Open quotes. And he made a scourge of cord and drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and the oxen. And he poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. John chapter 2, lines 14 to 15. In Luke chapter 22, line 36 to 38, Jesus is preparing his disciples for his departure. He knows that the Jewish leaders are decidedly against him. In the past, when he sent his disciples out, he took care of all their needs, but now things are going to change. Open quotes. And he said to them, but now whoever has a money belt, is to take it along. Likewise also a bag. And whoever has no sword is to sell his coat and buy one. For I tell you that this which is written must be fulfilled in me. And he was numbering with transgressors, for that which refers to me has its fulfillment. They said to him, Lord, look, here are 2 swords. And he said to them, it is enough. So we have 2 contrasting aspects of Jesus. We have the Jesus who says that the blessed are the peacemakers, but on the other hand, we have the figure of Christ who speaks and acts in no uncertain terms. Consider, for example, a very interesting passage that occurs in Matthew chapter 10, line 34. Open quotes. Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to earth. I do not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, a man's enemies with the members of his own household. Anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. Although in recent history, great leaders such as Mohandas Gandhi and Martin Luther King have preached pacifism and used peaceful means of pressure and promotion of their ideas, the dominant cultures of the world dismiss this philosophy as impractical and unrealistic. Both of those leaders finished by being assassinated by extremists and fanatics. But it would appear that it is generally accepted that war or the use of force, insofar as it translates itself into death and destruction, and the imposition by force, goes against the better judgment of human beings. In fact, even international law and international relations between sovereign states, war has been prohibited, if not for ethical and moral reasons, because of the consequences it would bring in terms of human and economic loss. In fact, the famous Kellogg-Briand Pact, or the Pact of Paris, officially known as the General Treaty for the Renunciation of War, as an instrument of national policy of 1928, was an international agreement in which signatory states promised not to use war to resolve disputes or conflict of whatever nature or whatever origin they may be. Parties failing to abide by this promise should be denied all the benefits furnished by the treaty. Similar provisions were incorporated in the United Nations Charter and other treaties. The term war has been abolished in international legal jargon, and instead, for example, Article 42 of the United Nations Charter speaks of a Security Council taking such action by air, sea, or land forces as may be necessary to maintain or restore international peace and security. But such action may include demonstrations, blockade, and other operations by air, sea, or land forces of member states of the United Nations. As we all know, however, armed conflicts and the use of force are still the order of the day, whether it is done according to accepted rules in terms of the official terminology or otherwise. The United Nations still finds it imperative to send a peacekeeping force to maintain peace and security and protect vulnerable people in troubled areas of the world. But we are still in the realm of stopping force by greater force. It is hard to envisage another St. Francis of Assisi, who in 1219, in the middle of the tumultuous Fifth Crusade, crossed the enemy lines to gain an audience with Al-Kamil, the Sultan of Egypt, a nephew of the great Muslim warrior Salah ad-Din, in his camp on the riverbank of the Nile. Francis, who opposed warfare, hoped to bring about peace by talking to the Sultan. He didn't succeed in converting him, but came away from the peaceful encounter with the revolutionary ideas that called for Christians to live harmoniously with Muslims.
Thank you, Dr. Greg. There is much food for thought in what you have been saying. What I may add is that even on the birth of Jesus, the angels spoke of peace, announced the peace to men of goodwill. And I think that those men of goodwill are also in this hall here. Our second speaker is Imam Ibrahim Ahmad Noonan, and I'm going to read some information about this man, our friend. Imam Ibrahim is the Imam of the Maryam Mosque, Galway, Ireland, and the Vice Natural President of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in Ireland. He has studied philosophy and theology, both Christian theology and Islamic theology, graduating from University of Wales Trinity of St. David and the Dominican Institute of Theology and Philosophy at ITT Dublin. He spent another 7 years with the Ahmadiyya Islamic Institute of Theology and Languages in London. Has a passion for humanitarian work and human rights. His other passion is ecumenical dialogue between all faiths and is very active in this area. He has given many talks on Islamic issues in many universities in the UK and Ireland, and is well-known commentator and writer in the national newspapers in Ireland, and has been invited on many national radio and TV programs in Ireland and UK. He has also worked in other countries on work projects like Iceland, Israel, Bosnia, Holland, Bangladesh. He is married and has 5 children. He is a keen sports person. He is at level 3 of level grade, third degree black belt in martial arts, and loves reading history. I prefer reading history than... Okay, Imam Ibrahim Ahmad Noonan.